What's up, everybody? Welcome back. I'm Abe, and let's talk about EVE Online. Yeah, it's been radio silence for a while, but having a baby and having a global pandemic will do that to you. So, without further ado, let's talk about the patch notes because there's a lot that's happened in here, and I think we ought to go through it. So I'll just read through it and offer side commentary as I see fit. But if you have any questions or if you want to talk about it, by all means, lay down a comment down below and we can get into it. So, big changes for balancing and just general, I don't know. I mean, they've got changes to balancing to a lot of ships. They've got changes to carriers and super carriers. They've got module changes for shield, and I would guess armor hardeners are coming, but I think just shield right now. But let's get into it, and we can talk about things as we go. So, features and changes. Balancing. Increases damage of void, conflagration, hail, and rage ammunition, small, medium, large, and extra large by 15%. That is I want to say the autocannon, as opposed like the short range versus long range weapon tier 2 ammo that they're upping the damage to. So that's interesting. Increased long range heavy fighter explosion radius by 50%, bomb base damage reduced by 20%, bomb hit points reduced by 20%. So they're decreasing the effectiveness of bombs, which some of these heavy fighters used. Although that said, they did increase the long range heavy fighter explosion radius by 50%, which I want to say makes it harder to apply damage to smaller ships. So less effective against frigates, against just smaller ships in general. So this goes in line with what they were talking about doing, where they wanted to make super carriers and carriers in general more of a, let's use this to attack a fort or a structure of some kind, as opposed to a catch-all, let's just drop carriers on somebody in our space and destroy everything. This will also have broad sweeping ramifications to PvE use for super carriers. And it remains to be seen just whether it pulls them completely out of ratting or what that does to them. So we'll just keep on here and see how that goes. Reduced effectiveness of all resistance modules by 20%. Includes all active and passive armor and shield resistance modules. Does not include resistance rigs or damage control. So I guess I misspoke earlier. Both armor and shield are impacted by this, and they'll get into the specifics and what those numbers are. They increased short range heavy fighter maximum velocity by 50%, so that makes them a little bit more survivable. Reduced stand-up guided bomb damage by 20%, and the damage of the stand-up light guided bomb, and those are what structures are shooting out, I believe, reduced from 850 to 700. Stand-up heavy guided bomb damage reduced from 3,000 to 2,400. So for the graphics, the Avatar Titan received an updated model with higher detailed textures and a brand new Doomsday firing effect to match. Characters will now have pre-randomized clothing, I guess, as opposed to showing up in their skivvies on character creation. And the Jita main station gets more in-construction scaffolding and new indications for the new undock. Hangar interior gets scaffolding as well. So getting into the modules, they performed Shield Hardener module tier aside, and the parts of the names of the modules that describe their role have been changed as follows. So the Adaptive Invulnerability field turns into the Adaptive Invulnerability Shield Hardener, and just down the line, instead of Ward field and Deflection field, they're all Anti-EM Shield Hardener, Anti-Explosive Shield Hardener, and so on and so forth. The Limited Adaptive Invulnerability field, the Tech 1 or 2 version of it, got changed to Compact Shield Hardener, and again, just the standard language throughout. So Limited turns to Compact. Enduring Adaptive Invulnerability Shield Hardener got the following statistics. Looks like 23.2, and then the specifics are 42, and varying, fitting requirements to go along with each of those. So this tier aside pass coincides with the global 20% reduction in resistance values for all resistance modules. Therefore, for some modules, that change might be different than 20% from the attributes on Tranquility before the patch. Tranquility being the name of the main server. New attributes, and the old ones are in parentheses afterwards. For changed modules or below, the resistance bonus changes are shown only for modules where the change is different than 20%. The compact went from 34 to 27, or let's see, resistances went from 25 to 23.2. The adaptive invulnerability shield hardener 2 went from 30 to 26 across the board. The posse shield hardener went from 27.5 to 26. Domination went from 25 to 26, and Dreadgarista went from 27 to 30. So they increased the resistances on some of the faction gear. The compact hardeners looks like went from 50 to 42. The Poacher, Snake Eyes, Nugget, Desert Heat all went from 52.5 to 44. The Domination specific hardeners all went from 50 to 44. Caldari Navy all went from 55 to 45. Dreadgaristas all went from 55 to 45. The Gist C-Type went from 54.5 to 45. And let's see, the volume of all shield hardeners has been set to 5 cubic meters. And the meta level changes are as follows. The named meta 2 went to meta 1. Faction meta 9 went to meta 8. C-Type from 11 to 10, A-Type from 13 to 14, X-Type from 14 to 16, Officer meta 12 to 13, meta 13 to 15, and 14 to 17. I'm not sure exactly what that translates to, but something to keep in mind. Now, again, this is just... When I read the article on sort of the precursor to the patch, and before the patch notes came out, they were talking about how they wanted to make the game more dynamic and more bloody, that ships shouldn't be able to just tank ad nauseum. And a lot of these changes are to reduce the ability to tank and hopefully make more ships die. When I jumped in and looked, it looked like the super that I very recently acquired for ratting went from having effectively something like 21 to 24 million effective hit points down to 11. So big changes. Getting into ships, they reworked super carrier support fighter tubes. They took out support fighter tubes. They decreased from 2 to 0, so no longer will you be tackling anything in your super. Heavy fighter tubes, though, increased from 3 to 4. Overall, there are 5 tubes generally, so you can carry four heavies and 1 light now. Super carrier and Titan plate bonus was reduced. Super used to get 400%, now it's 200%, and Titans used to get 500%, and now it's down to 300%. And it looks like the dog came in to say hello. Hello, Ella. Good to see you. The Wyvern, or the Wyvern, depending on how you pronounce that, and the Aeon Fighter Bay increased to match the Nyx and the Hell. T1 Faction and Pirate Battleship base hit points increased by 10%. T1 Faction and Pirate Battleship base scan resolution increased by 30%. And then for some of these individual ships, there were different changes. So for the Munin, the damage bonus reduced from 7.5% to 5% per level, and the optimal range bonus reduced from 7.5 to 5 as well. Which I feel like is an interesting change. I saw a lot of articles where people were just crapping all over the... Oh gosh, I thought it was the Munin. Maybe I was wrong. Either way, sad to see them nerf that. The Eagle had its max velocity reduced from 202 to 190 and had its power grid reduced by 40. This next one is pretty significant. The Loki, the power grid reduced from 670 to 550. Bonus to projectile range and fall off reduced from 10% to 5% per level. And the Loki bonus to projectile tracking reduced from 7.5% to 5%. So major nerf for the Loki. The Legion, they reduced their power grid as well from 700 to 625. The Deimos hybrid damage increased from 5 to 7.5% per level. They added 50 power grid and 20 CPU to that. Looks like scan resolution buffs for Marauders and Black Ops by 30%. Hey, Ella Bell, if you're going to have a psychotic break, why don't you do it out there? Yeah, go get. Yeah. All right. So the Redeemer went from 170 millimeters to 220. I don't think it's millimeters, but I'm just going to say millimeters. The Paladin increased from 120 to 160, the Golem from 105 to 140, the Widow from 115 to 150, the Kronos from 120 to 160, the Sin from 140 to 185, the Vargur from 145 to 180, the Panther from 155 to 200, the Marshal from 180 to 235. And then the Freighters all got a bonus to their hit points by 20%. So Providence went from 100 to 120. Providence Armor increased 46 to 55.2 thousand. Providence Shield went from 10,000 to 12,000. And to save myself reading a whole ton of numbers, you can see them here for each of them, and it is indeed a 20% buff to overall hit points, and that's to hull, to armor, and to shield. So, Force Auxiliaries are now limited to onlining one capacitor booster. So instead of like stacking cap boosters and being able to rep continuously, they now can only have one. Structures and deployables, structure profiles can now be duplicated. And for the user interface, removed confirmation pop-up for Empire selection. Added and improved UI elements on the character creation process. They added tooltips for randomize, character sculpting, and zoom. Icons pulse to demonstrate a working state. They changed randomize, gender, zoom, toggle close, and navigation buttons to more conventional looks. They improved navigation between steps during character creation. Changing empire and or race now requires taking a step back in the process. Mousing over an entry on the customize appearance will display a randomize icon for that specific entry. Changed color of labels and buttons to blue. Active steps now display some blue colors as the labels, same blue colors as the labels and buttons. They removed the portrait confirmation window, added non-clickable gender icon on final summary, and changed finalize to enter game in the last step button. The ability to import and export market quick bar has been added. Importing into multi-buy window now retains the order in clipboard. Market search has been optimized and changed so it filters as you type. The tooltip on contracts has been improved, making it easier to read. A tooltip has been added to the arrow in character selection that shows wallet balance changes. This tooltip shows how much the balance has changed. In localizing clients, both English and localized type names can now be imported into skill queue, fitting, and multi-buy, and when appropriate, an option to export in English. Improvements have been made to the slider in Corp or Alliance contacts. Yeah, I thought maybe I heard my son. He is taking a nap, but I did not. Improvements in contacts management, making it possible to use the mouse wheel to give better control. Text on brackets can now be formatted to bold, italic, underline, color, font size, line breaks. Text on tabs in overview can now be colored. Fleet Watch, I think my overview already has the text on the tabs colored, but it was buggy at best. Fleet Watch list is now in color edit mode by default. Show info windows are now better at remembering what tab was selected. Contents of inventory can now be copied in icon mode. The universal search bar now has a shortcut, Shift-S. Collapse All button has been added to the hulls and fits and hardware tabs in the fitting window, as well as the search result window. Improvements to mailing list management interface, including allowing dragging characters into allowed and blocked lists. The list under item group in corporation assets is now alphabetically sorted. Tooltip has been added to ship groups listed as can be fitted to in attribute tab in show info window. This tooltip lists what ships belong to the ship group. It's now possible to copy the information in the lists in the reprocessing window, and a helper pointer has been added to the board Corvette button. Helper pointer, I wonder what that looks like. So it's unfortunate that they didn't also, as far as UI changes, they didn't address the red dot plague that has encompassed the game, but I guess we can't get too much too quickly. I feel like it would be pretty simple, like change the opacity or allow you to change the color or just opt out of it. I don't know. Anyway, defect fixes. Graphics and audio, they fixed an issue whereby a capsule would not return to the default skin correctly. Fixed an issue where some UI elements were causing the space or hangar scene to be rendered black. Fixed the special entry SFX or special effects in some systems under certain events which were playing when logging into a station in the system. Fixed an issue whereby special SFX played upon entering particular systems to start playing again if inactive client muted was enabled. These are very specific. corrected the manufacturing output of the low-grade Hydra Omega blueprint, fixed an issue that prevented the men's Fatal Elite combat boots from appearing in searches. For PvE, stealth bombers can now enter the hunt event sites, and technically, they fixed an issue preventing the warning for too high or too low price for advanced buy order and modify order windows from appearing in the user interface. They fixed an issue with HyperNet Relay that allowed to enter negative values when buying multiple nodes. Fixed an issue that allowed to enter negative values when buying data cores from R&D agents. Fixed an issue with wallet settings disappearing when stacking windows. They adjusted the wallet so the closest LP store will now list the current station if it contains the correct LP store instead of another station in the system. Audio will now play correctly when setting a CSPA charge larger than the maximum allowed value. They adjusted unallocated skill points pop-up to avoid text overflow. They re-added the missing R to donations in the wallet when they are accompanied by a note. Added an appropriate error text when searching for a name that doesn't exist in the Transfer To field of the GiveISK tab. Adjusted GiveISK search by adding a terms combo box. Closest LP store list in the wallet station will now be correctly localized, and they fixed the icon for officer modules in search results in the market window. And then lastly, for third-party developers, a static data export, or SDE. The data for contraband types can now be found at fsd/contrabandtypes.yaml and no longer at bsd/blah blah blah due to the internal migration of the data. The data is also slightly differently structured. So that wraps us up for this massive block of patch notes, and we'll see what this does to the meta. We'll see what it does to the game, and you'll note that they haven't changed anything with mining or ore values yet, so they leave the economy in shambles, and the ore availability has been gutted. So we'll just see what happens in May and hope for the best. So thanks for watching, and you may see more of me. Maybe you won't. We'll see if I can find time to make these videos. And yeah, if you want to see a specific video, by all means let me know. And thank you for watching, and I will catch you on the flip side.